Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, we'll tell you about a hack on an Android phone that's so easy my 2-year-old could pull it off. Plus, did you know that FireFox is going to battle with McAfee, and it looks like potentially Bank of America has been under attack all week. But after all of that, we'll tell you about ultimate backups from the very fundamentals to the very best backup tools. All that and more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. It's our Systems Network and Administration podcast, and it was filmed live on October 6th for release on October 7th. And it is episode 26. That means it marks half a year point. And joining me for the entire half of that year is Alan. Hey there, Alan. Welcome back.
Hey, Chris. Everybody.
Hey, man. And you know what I realized before we started the show is we are seriously just getting started. Like, we are just at the starting line still. And that, when I realized that, I got a ton of energy to do the show today. So I am pumped about today's show because it's like, even though it's half a year in, it's
we're really just getting started. It's just we're just finding that groove and really getting into it. So
and a lot of this show, I wanted to mention this at the top of the show because we really value our TechSNAP subreddit. Links.techsnap.tv is the subreddit that powers the show. Go check that out. You can throw in questions like that's up there right now, and also some awesome stories. And you'll notice as we go through this episode that a lot of what's in this episode came right from this very subreddit. So go check that out. It's links.techsnap.tv, and that's a great way to interact with the show. But
yes, Alan, and it's the easiest way for us to get the stories in because there's so much stuff, and especially the questions and remarks and stuff too.
Yeah. Now somebody emailed me and they said, you always mention jblive.tv and that you're live at 1 p.m. Pacific, and what is that, 4 p.m. Eastern now? Is that what we are?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, but a lot of us are worker drones. We're in our cubes and we're not going to watch a flash video. You should tell people about jblive.am. And I realized that jblive.am is probably the perfect place to go if you want to watch or listen to TechSNAP, I should say, either when you're commuting home or when you're sitting at your desk like a little worker drone. And you want to listen in. It's jblive.am. You can go there on your mobile device or on your web browser, and then you can get the URL and plug that in and just listen to the audio stream. That goes 24/7. It's a companion to the video stream.
Yeah, I forgot that we fixed that.
Yeah, and I that's kind of what got people emailing me again because it was down for a little bit, and then thanks to a little remote troubleshooting from Alan, we actually got it back and going again, and I started getting a flood of emails. People like, you got to tell people about that thing. So there you go. All right, Alan. Well, we've got a ton of show today, and we've really got to we're kind of getting to the end of this whole ultimate backup, story arc that we've been on, the ultimate firewall, and home server, and RAID. Now we're doing backups. And I think people are really going to enjoy this episode because we have a ton of goodies in this. I think this is going to be one of those go-to episodes that we'll point to for a long time. So stay tuned for that. But before we get to all of that, we've got to tear into some technology news and security news this week because, oh my goodness, Android. You got
this isn't Android's fault.
I know, but it's just another mark on the name. That's all it is. It's just they keep taking another hit. No, this one pretty much fits pretty squarely in the hands of Samsung, doesn't it?
Actually, AT&T.
Oh, really? So it's only the AT&T Samsung Galaxy 2. All right. So tell us what happened here.
So basically, there's a bug in the AT&T version of the Samsung Galaxy S2. Horribly complicated name for a phone, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah. But basically, the bug allows someone to bypass the security lockout screen. So you know how you either have the swipe pattern or the PIN number?
Yeah.
Well, in certain circumstances, you can get away from that. So basically...
like what, for an emergency call or something?
Well, no. Basically, if you hit the lock button, that wakes up the phone and brings up the prompt.
Sure.
And if you leave it and let it fall back to sleep, but then immediately hit the lock button again, it lets you into the phone without unlocking it.
Oh, so this is like just a usability hole here.
Yeah. So it's a usability feature that
bypasses the password.
Yeah. The interesting thing is the flaw doesn't affect the Sprint version of the same Galaxy S2.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Or other Samsung phones like the Epic Touch 4G and so on.
So is this something like AT&T says, well, we have a standard on how things must operate around here, and you must implement this feature in your software?
Well, isn't it that AT&T takes the base software and modifies it and puts their logo on it and all the stuff they do, right?
I guess so. Oh, okay. So we're watching a video of it works. It's shockingly simple on actually how you do it. You can just pick up somebody's phone and do that in 2 seconds.
Right. Now, it doesn't work if the phone was freshly rebooted, but who reboots their phone and then doesn't use it? So basically what it appears to be is designed for the situation where you're using your phone, for example, to read a text message or an email or whatever, and you don't touch the screen for 30 seconds so it goes to sleep, right? But if you hit a button like right away, it wakes back up and doesn't make you unlock it again.
Right.
Because that would be annoying.
Right.
But in this case, what it's not checking was that you unlocked it the first time.
I see.
So if you pull the same,
update.
Yeah, this is a software bug, likely specific to something AT&T did. Right. So basically, all they need to do is fix the feature and make it so that instead of being predicated on if the screen was just on and if you wake it up 1 second after it went to sleep, then don't make you do the unlock, and instead do something like don't give the unlock screen twice within 90 seconds or something similar.
Can I ask your opinion on something?
What's that?
Doesn't it seem like a feature where it's sort of security oriented like this? Because like take for example, on my Android phone, I have my Dropbox, my Mint account on there. I have, Evernote on there with tons of stuff in there. Medical notes, all kinds of things. My phone security is pretty important. Plus, it's got, private messages and things like that. Why is this thing that, is a user end security feature, why is that even a vendor modifiable thing in an OS? It seems like that just makes protecting that more of a challenge for Android. Like if Google needs to push out an update and to fix something with the lock screen, and Samsung or AT&T has their own custom implementation, it won't get the fix.
And that's the advantage to, for example, I specifically bought the Google Nexus S because it doesn't have the customized firmware from my phone company. So I don't have a TELUS logo, and
that's why
I get the updates more quickly because I get them straight from Google instead of having to wait for my phone company to customize their version and push it out.
I should make a quick plea. I'm sorry to derail here, but this week I cracked my Nexus S screen really bad. Like the actual screen is really pretty screwed up. Can you email me, Chris@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit me up on Twitter, twitter.com/ChrisLAS. Does anybody know, have they successfully sent their Samsung phone somewhere or any Android phone somewhere? I have the Nexus S and I'd love to get it repaired because I don't really want to buy another phone. Because I spent, that's an unlocked phone. I spent like $600 for that thing. So if anybody knows how I can get that fixed, let me know. Because honestly, Alan, I think the undertone of this conversation here is that both you and I sort of have a bit of an agenda when it comes to Android, and part of that is because we kind of want to inform the audience a little bit.
Yep.
And I think we both probably solidly agree that if you are an Android customer and you're concerned about things like security or vendor spying on you or things like that, you really should research how challenging it is to unlock your Android phone, root that thing, and maybe even potentially look into replacing the ROM that came from your manufacturer with something from a community. Now, do your research, but I have had an original Droid. I've had a Droid X. I've had a Nexus S, and I've had an Evo 4G, and I've had a Galaxy Tab. That's a lot of Android devices in about a year and a half's time period. And all of them were greatly improved by replacing that ROM. By taking administrative ownership over my device, by giving all you're doing when you're rooting a device is giving yourself administrator access. That's what you're doing. It's not like you're breaking in and hacking it. You're just giving yourself an administrative rights over a computer
your own
that you
phone.
Own. And I think both Alan and I want to be big proponents that you look into this, because things like this story here where the vendor's software just has some sort of hole.
Or the one we talked about last week with HTC spying on you.
On LAS. Did we mention that on TechSNAP at all?
No, I don't think so. It was just on LAS.
Yeah, it was a big story on Linux Action Show about major flaws in HTC's new Sense update. And again, rooted users who have their own ROMs are not affected by this kind of stuff. And they often have the newer Android features out there before most vendor phones do. With the exception of the Nexus S that both Alan and I own, because that's sort of your legitimate way.
Straight from Google.
Yeah, but that's really, you pay a major price for that. And the Nexus S isn't the most compelling phone out there anymore either.
No.
It's just a good phone.
Yeah.
So I don't mean to derail this conversation on, but I think that really is the undertone of what we're both saying here.
Yeah. But it's another example of the vendors, whether that's Samsung and HTC or the phone companies like AT&T and Sprint, messing with the core product and sometimes devaluing it. They're throwing all their own apps and crap in there, or spyware or whatever. And it's more and more important that you be able to take administrative access of your own phone and put a clean ROM on there that isn't all muddled up.
Right. Now, we don't happen to be lucky enough to have there be like a workaround that users can just do now. Because I'm sure there's probably a few people listening that have that.
It's a setting that you can actually turn off. So if you go into the settings, location and security, and the screen unlock settings, you can set the timeout to be immediate so that it will prompt you to unlock every time.
That takes care of that, right?
Yeah. Also, anyone who is using the Microsoft Exchange security policies, so if you're connected to an Exchange server and the Exchange server enforces security on your phone,
ActiveSync,
then it automatically has set that setting and your phone is secure.
Interesting. Which
is an important feature that normally you only get with things like a BlackBerry, where you could have corporate policies enforcing security on your phone.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, that ActiveSync service also allows the remote corporation to wipe the phone if it's lost. So that's kind of handy too. If you lose a device, we're talking about how much information you have on there. A lot of times in that corporate kind of exchange setup, they can do that kind of thing, and that's sort of a nice peace of mind too. Although also kind of creepy.
Which also reminds me that I need to find a proper belt holster for my phone so I don't lose it.
Yeah, no kidding, right? What do you say? Should we move on to the next story?
Yes.
It's a Firefox story. So I think people will find this interesting because I love it when Firefox kind of throws down and just kind of tells people how it is, like they did with the Java stuff, and now they're stepping up and they're going after McAfee, aren't they, Alan?
Well, specifically, McAfee has an add-on for Firefox called ScanScript, which is automatically installed when you install the newest McAfee corporate security suite.
Oh, okay.
The problem is that now with Firefox 7, because the plugin I think was meant for Firefox 6, it's causing huge stability and security problems. Specifically, it's responsible for a ridiculous number of crash reports that Firefox has been getting.
Oh, surprise. And
if you remember back in the early days of Windows Vista and 7, where they were blaming NVIDIA for people thinking Windows 7 was unstable. Well, in this case, a lot of people are saying, oh, Firefox 7 is crashing on me all the time, and it turns out it's actually because of McAfee.
Yeah, that like Vadis Prime in the chat room saying that must make Mozilla rage. I mean, talk about just hijacking in a sense your browser and just inserting that extension in there and then making it a worse experience for the user.
Well, specifically making Firefox crash all the time.
Can you believe that it's 2011 and these dumb antivirus vendors still can't figure out a good user experience? I mean, it's laughable at this point.
I think in this case, it's just an API incompatibility, right? Because their software isn't open source or anything, they're just trying to hack their way into and become part of Firefox. And that was working in Firefox 6, but then people upgraded to Firefox 7 and the plugin just assumed it was still Firefox 6.
Yeah, see, it's a little quality control issue there.
Yeah, the plugin didn't say, oh, hey, look, the API is different. I'm not going to be able to scan for viruses until I get a new version or whatever.
So are they putting out like an update?
So Firefox, in their latest update, now gives a pop-up message to anyone using McAfee saying, you really should disable that. It's going to make Firefox crash a lot.
Good for them.
Specifically if you're using versions 14.4 or older.
Good for them.
So McAfee now says that they're working with people at Mozilla Firefox to solve the issue for the next version of their software, and it should be back to normal. But again, with Firefox 8 comes out, is that going to cause the same problem?
I just can't think of a single antivirus vendor over the years that has given me more of a headache than McAfee. Really, seriously. Like Norton's high on that list, but when it comes to just screwing up the system...
Those two are the most because they're very popular in corporate environments.
Yes.
Especially because they have all the tools to enforce things like Active Directory group policies to push the virus scanner out to every machine and make sure it's scanning and make it nearly impossible for the end user to disable the virus scanner.
I don't know if you remember that story a little bit before Intel bought McAfee, but there was this update that McAfee pushed out that just wreaked havoc across Windows servers all over the IT industry. Do you remember this story at all?
I don't remember that one, no.
Well, having multiple clients that ran Windows servers and used McAfee, of course, I had several clients at once get hit with major disasters. And I remember it broke Citrix systems, so I had a client that was an airline where they had to ground their planes because of this McAfee bug. I'm not kidding. And you want to talk about a high-stress situation. You have multiple clients that are on the line broken, and one of them is an airline with down flight. That is a high-pressure IT job, let me tell you.
Yes.
That took a few years off my life, and I'll never forgive McAfee for that.
Yeah. At the same time, I think this is also exposing a problem with the rapid release cycle with Firefox. Right? The rule with version numbers was always that, if it's inside version 6, then the upgrades can't break compatibility with plugins and so on.
Wow, look at this. Sorry to
Right.
derail again, Alan, but just quick mention to Dream in the chat room. He actually remembered. I'm sorry, but this is just an interesting little factoid. The final way I got resolution was I went to Twitter and I started tweeting Citrix support and McAfee support and told them that, you know, we're dying here. We're not getting through on our 1-800 numbers or anything. We're totally dying here. The airline's down. And through Twitter, I got the issue resolved. So if anybody ever tells you Twitter is not a useful tool, that day it was an amazing tool for me. So, all right. Sorry, Alan. Sorry to keep derailing. I'm all done with the nostalgia.
Right. I was just saying, with Firefox going to this rapid release cycle, it's kind of a pain, especially in corporate environments where, for example, they wouldn't be able to upgrade their Firefox until the next version of McAfee came out because of a corporate policy says that they have to use McAfee to prevent JavaScript viruses or whatever.
Yeah, if they're going to have this rapid release schedule, they really, you know, the extension breakage has really got to be carefully
resolved, because it's totally screwing me up. I'm using FireGPG, which is now only community supported. The main developer's gone.
Right.
And so it takes a really long time for somebody to get around to compiling the DLL I need for Windows. And because of that, I'm stuck with a broken extension for like a couple of weeks every time they do a version upgrade. And that's happening a lot now, like 4 times this year.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny. We're busting McAfee's balls for breaking Firefox. But then on the other side of the fence, you have Microsoft, which has been screwing with Chrome with their Security Essentials antivirus. So you got to feel a little bit for these browser
guys,
right?
that was meant to go in last and never made it last week.
Yeah, it's just kind of an interesting tie into this story. You feel bad, but
yes, is that Microsoft flagging Chrome as being a virus?
Yeah, Chrome definitely handles this extension thing and this whole update process a lot better. I mean, one thing I've noticed in Chrome is sometimes I'll just randomly have an extension not work anymore, and it's because of incompatibility, but it's silent. It doesn't break the browser.
Right.
It's pretty self-aware.
In Firefox, in each plugin, they have a setting that says works with what versions. And, you know, people that write the plugins don't randomly say it works up to versions that don't exist yet. And so until they go around to pushing an update, it breaks everything. And I really wish Firefox would not rev the major version so fast. Like, I don't know what was so different in 7 from 6 where it couldn't just be 6.1 or whatever and maintain the compatibility. I imagine there was something. I just don't know what it was.
Well, I think they feel like they're on a path that is going to make them competitive, and I hope it works. I hope that this annoyance doesn't turn people away from it.
Right.
Time will tell. You ready to move on to the next story?
Yes.
And this one's interesting, Alan, because I've been really trying to parse what the heck's actually going on here. And it honestly, to me, feels like there's more than what's being let on. But why don't we talk a little bit about Bank of America and the troubles, the unprecedented amount of troubles they've been having this week with their website?
Yes. So their website of Bank of America has been either degraded and slow, returning an error message, or just outright down for more than 6 days now.
So on the heel of them announcing that new $5 a month debit charge.
The interesting thing is that this happened the day after they announced that they would be charging $5 a month for all account holders that use their debit cards and don't maintain a minimum balance of $5,000.
Yeah, and now Bank of America has maintained that they're not under attack, that this is not a response to that.
Specifically, yes. They're like, they want to be really clear that the performance issues have nothing to do with hacking, malware, denial of service, or anything else.
Now, ABC Radio interviewed a security expert who says the only reasonable conclusion is that they're under attack.
Well, part of the other interesting thing from the Computer World article was that it seems that their main chunk of their performance problem happens during the same time frame every day, from like 8 a.m. till 9:30 or something like that.
So
that's a little weird.
That could be a batch processing thing.
That could be something happening in the back end. But why would they set that to run at 8 a.m.?
Maybe I don't know.
It's just bank time or whatever. But
I just I do have quite a bit of banking background.
If it is something in the background or like a process like that, you would think after 6 days they would have figured out which one it was and corrected the problem.
They could have I think people would be I think they'd fundamentally have their confidence shooken in a lot of our financial institutions if they knew how kludged together the back end is. It's a bunch of vendor technologies that don't directly interact, so they have to use these other services to message between them. Like, there's actually an entire multi-million-dollar industry around building software that takes one vendor system and translates messaging and sends it to another vendor system.
Yep.
And a lot of these banks are all interconnected like this, especially banks like Bank of America, who have merged and merged and merged and just absorbed different technology setups.
Yeah,
It
so
could
they
be
have
they're
all
so
these,
complicated that they can't figure out what's going on. It's possible.
Yeah. because they bought so many other banks that had unique systems. They now have a bunch of different unique systems all trying to work together, and it's just a massive kludge.
It's also possible that Bank of America is under attack, and
again, not wanting to have their customers' confidence shaken is trying to say, no, that's not it.
Yeah. Well,
Although the time frame thing does suggest more what you were saying, that it was something in the back end and it's just a performance problem.
Yeah.
But at the same time, why is that performance problem affecting their website so badly?
this seems like one of those stories that's coming out this week that we kind of noticed, and that it's either going to just kind of be resolved and it was like, yeah, it was a technical thing, or in episode 27, we're gonna have like a ton of information on what's going on, and that, yeah, it was an attack.
Yep.
Like, it seems like I could see this going either way.
Yep.
So I guess only time will tell. Do you have any other thoughts on this one?
No, that was about it. Just there's two different articles in that one, and they provide a little bit of different
Perspectives.
insights. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right, Alan, you know what that means. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback. And it is time for the feedback segment. Now, if you've been watching along, we've had the ultimate segment now for a while where we've covered all kinds of different things. And in this week, it is time to bring in the backups, because now, theoretically, you might have an awesome ultimate firewall. You might even have an ultimate file server with ultimate RAID setup, but you still need to protect your data. And I think before we get going, we should probably look at some of the concepts and the obstacles to actually doing real proper backups, Al. Not just, not just lip service to backups, but the actual, like, what you need to think about and things like that. And also, there's like a ton of different ways. So there's some manual methods I think we could cover. And then towards the end, I think we could toss in a couple like push buttons that are, I think we would recommend pretty strongly. What do you think? Does that sound like a good top to bottom order?
Yeah, because specifically, a lot of people would rely on something like RAID
as their only source of backup.
Right, and that guarantees that if a hard drive dies, you're still running or whatever, right? And so, but it's only providing redundancy. So if you accidentally delete a file, it's gone. It's gone,
yeah.
Right, and that's why you still need backup, even if you have RAID.
A backup is not a working copy. A backup is a separate copy.
Right.
And
a proper backup system has more than one copy of every file.
Yeah.
Or specifically, if the file was changed, it has more than one version.
I'll tell you what really brought this home for me was when I had kids, and I had, of course, I got married, and they're all just digital pictures. They're not, a small fraction of them ever get printed. And, when my grandfather died, we went through, all of his belongings, and, sort of the family does what the family does. And one of the things was boxes and boxes of pictures that they had with them over the years. And I thought, all that would have to happen is for the laptop hard drive and my wife's laptop to die, for me to lose all of it, that entire legacy. So backups became really important to me when it clicked with me like that. Yep. And I think probably a lot of people out there can relate to something like that that's really important to them that they want to back up. So, Alan, where do you think we should start? Do you want to talk about the types of backups, or what do you think?
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about the types and the levels of backup. Because basically doing a full backup every day is kind of impossible and would require a lot of storage.
Yeah.
And again, but deciding what type of backup and how often you need to back up and so on is really dependent on your data. Right? If it's pictures, the pictures aren't going to change ever. So you back them up once and you just have to keep adding the new pictures as a backup.
Right.
But if it's something like documents that you're working on all the time, then you probably want this point in time, right? A copy from every day or even more often than that.
Yeah.
So that if, for example, I've seen this happen with people with Excel documents, especially really big ones, spreadsheets, is that something gets goofed up in a formula or a macro, or just the file becomes corrupted in some way. And they don't notice until 1 or 2 days later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they don't need, if you only have one backup, right? You make a copy to a USB drive every day. That's fine, except for if that backup happens on the broken copy, and now you don't have a good copy anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why it's important, that, especially with critical files, to have layers of backup.
Now, one thing to keep in mind is a lot of different operating systems have some built-in solutions that address part of that. Maybe like the revisioning, like Windows
Yep.
7 has some file versioning. OS 10 Lion does, and Linux has something like you can load back in time and things like that. But all of those generally just back up to that local drive. So if you lose that
Right.
local drive, you lose those revisions too.
Right. And, in all of those are just to supplement your backups so that you don't have to do a restore operation for one silly little file.
Yeah, really, that's what it is.
Right. They're not meant to replace backups, just to supplement them. So the most typical type of backup is the full backup. And it's basically a backup of every file, or maybe a certain set of folders, or every file except for certain exclusions. But basically a backup of everything that you want to back up. So that's the base of every other backup.
The idea is that you could take that one backup and you could restore completely to that point in time.
Yeah.
And it would be just that one thing, because as you go forward, that's not always the case with backups.
Right. And so this is also what's known as a level 0 backup, because it's the very first level. So full backups are the biggest. They take the most space because they have to contain everything. And therefore, they're also the slowest. They take the most time to create, because especially if you're backing up 100 gigs or something, that takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
So the next type of backup is a differential backup. And so a differential backup is every file that has changed since the last full backup was started.
And that last full backup could be from 2 days ago, or it could be like from a month ago. It just depends on how you have it set up.
Yeah. But the important thing there is that it's based on when the last full backup started, not when it finished.
Oh, okay.
That's a typical mistake a lot of people don't think about.
Which can get you in trouble if your backups take a long time to complete, right?
Right. Yeah. So if your full backup, for example, on one of my servers, because it's over the network and it's throttled so that it doesn't break the connection, the full backup takes 2.5 days.
Jeez. So it can easily kick off. So your incremental backup could easily kick off while your full backup was still going if you didn't have a time.
Well, actually, our system prevents that from happening.
Yeah,
but most importantly, if as the full backup's going across, say it does it in alphabetical order, so it's got up to like the letter M. It's in the middle of the backup. But then, I might go back and change a file that starts with letter B.
Sure. Come in the next business day or whatever, and you get to work.
And when the backup's finished, if I base it on any file that's changed since the last backup finished, it's going to think that B file was backed up in the full backup.
Right.
But the change didn't happen until after that part of the backup was finished.
Mm-hmm.
So you always want to base your next level backup on when the previous backup started. There might be a little bit of redundancy there, but you'd rather have that than missing a file.
So what's the difference between a differential and an incremental backup then?
Right. And then the other thing, a differential backup requires only the most recent full backup to do a restore.
Right.
Right. So, for example, in our example, what we do is we do a full backup once a month, the differential on every Sunday that's not the first Sunday of the month, because that's when the full happens, and then an incremental every other day.
So the incrementals kind of get you by during the day, and the differentials get you closer to a full backup during the month without having to spend the time of doing a complete backup.
You have a differential once a week and the incremental once a day.
Yeah.
And so what that means is normally you'd have to we'll get to a picture in a minute. Anyway, so an incremental backup is just every file that has changed since the last backup of any type, whether it was a differential, a full, or just another incremental.
Right.
So it's just everything that's changed since the last time we did a backup.
Okay.
The advantage is that makes incrementals the smallest size and the fastest, because you're just grabbing the files that have changed in the last day if you're doing a backup every day.
That would probably work for probably most home users and even most small businesses right there.
Right. The downside is that incremental backups take the longest to restore, because to restore from an incremental backup, you might need as many as every incremental backup going back to the last differential, plus the full backup.
And depending on how you're storing those, like if you're storing them on a USB drive or on tapes, you'll have to go get all of those.
If you're using tapes, then you could end up needing a stack of tapes.
I hate that.
Yeah. But due to their smaller size, it makes it easier to keep that point in time backup. So that means that you have that Excel file from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So you pick which one you want. If you were doing a full every day, you probably would only keep a couple of days at a time. Whereas in my system, I keep my incrementals going at least back 10 days.
That's nice.
Actually, I keep more than that, but because of the way the system works, it guarantees it'll keep 10. It tries to keep more, but it recycles the tape.
That's especially nice if you have like a pet project you're working on. It's maybe, it could be a Photoshop file, it could be a GIMP file, it could be a code file, whatever it is. And, you realize a couple days in, oh man, I just screwed this thing up.
Yep.
And, that's
being able to go back and pluck out that backup is important.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's one of the features I like a lot about Dropbox is one of the things they do. Even though I'm sure they depend heavily on that deduping feature where they can see what everybody's files are, has been really nice. In fact, my master XML file for all the RSS feeds for the Jupiter Broadcasting shows, I mixed it up one time and uploaded it to the server, overwrote my copy on the server, and then realized I'd screwed it up. And thanks to that Dropbox incremental file changes, I was able to restore a good version and fix the RSS feeds really quick.
Yep.
So it's huge.
Well, yes, because of the way the deduplication works, in Dropbox, they do what's called copy on write. So when you change a file, it doesn't replace the original. It makes a new copy of the new version. So that in case it was deduplicated with somebody else had a copy of the original, it doesn't ever delete the original. It just makes a copy of every different version.
Which is nice.
And so because of that, those copies are there anyway, so you can go back.
Yeah, I like that.
And some backup systems do have deduplication. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, definitely.
But if you want to bring up that diagram now.
Okay. All right. Which one? We have two here.
The first one.
Okay. First one is ready for you, sir.
Okay. So in this diagram, just pretend this is a calendar. I'm sorry for my Photoshop or MS Paint drawings.
Yeah, MS Paint. It was like a quick MS Paint project before the show started.
So this is a little calendar. So on the first day of the month, in the blue square, that's a full backup. So we backed up all the files on the server. Then every day after that, we did a green, which is an incremental backup, right? So on Sunday, we did the full. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we have incremental backups.
Okay.
So that's just the files that changed that day. Then on the next Sunday, we see the yellow square. Mm-hmm. That's a differential backup. So that's backup,
all the changes since the full backup.
Yeah. So that basically
disregards what was done in the incrementals and gets everything that's changed since that Sunday.
Yeah, just everything that's changed since the last full backup.
Okay.
So that basically obviates the need to keep all of those previous incrementals.
Right.
Although you might keep them anyway, because what if you need the version of the file that got changed? If a file got deleted on like the Wednesday, it's not going to be in the newest differential.
Right.
And so you're going to want to be able to go back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you don't necessarily wipe out the incrementals right away. So anyway, after that, on the second Monday, again, we do an incremental and go on, and then we see the red square. So the red square is...
Chat room's making fun of you for having 8-day long weeks.
I didn't realize that it is.
They're just saying that that's how hardcore you are, is that you work 8 days a week.
Yes.
I love it. Chat room is so funny.
Anyway,
all right,
so
moving on.
The red square is the disaster. The hard drive blows up or whatever.
Yeah.
So now if you want to switch to the next image, to restore everything to exactly how it was on the day before the disaster, you need every one of the files covered by the gray arrow there, or every one of the tapes, or whatever they happen to be.
Yeah, so in this diagram, that's a week's worth of backups.
Yeah,
you would have
so
to grab.
you need 5 incremental backups, each of the 5 incremental backups, then the most recent differential, which covers everything between the last full and that differential, and then the full.
That's kind of a mess.
But at the same time,
it's good, but it's a lot. I mean, if you don't have if you have that on a medium, I'm just picturing it in like a panic situation where you are under the gun to get things restored. You want to be sure you're well organized where you have all those backups.
Right. So your tapes need to be labeled and so. Now, a bunch of those incrementals could all be on the same tape, stored end to end.
Sure.
So
absolutely.
it might not actually be physical tape.
Yeah. Or drives or anything.
Yeah. In our system, it's actually just files on a file server.
Yeah.
In an archive format. And so it just flips through them and grabs the right files.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But now, every one of those isn't always required. Depends if you're restoring just certain files or everything.
Sure.
And so on. If you're restoring everything, you do need all of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you just need Susie's file, it might just be on one tape and you might be fine.
Yeah. And now, depending on how important your data is, you may be doing a differential once a day and incrementals once an hour. But that's kind of, that's really serious backup.
It seems like, especially for home use, tape isn't really an option. But I even think in kind of the enterprise environment, it seems like the usage of tape must be diminishing. It just seems like such an inefficient
They don't make
medium.
tapes big enough anymore, right?
Right. I mean, it has a lot of advantages. The fact that, you can put a lot of high density information on something and then move it around and store it a long time is extremely valuable.
It's small, it stores easy,
yeah.
and it's readable when it's been stored.
Right. So there's a lot of value there.
If you leave hard drives on a shelf for a while, they don't tend to always work when you plug them back in.
But generally now, your generic large storage terabyte drives plus are becoming cheaper than LTE drive tapes and things like that.
Yeah, that's our backup system is a bunch of large drives in a server. Now whether that's RAID or whatever, or if we just have 2 of those servers, but whatever, it's, you don't necessarily need all as much redundancy in the backup system because they're just backups.
Now so there's, if you're a corporate environment, you really got to look at it because tapes do offer some advantages, and depending on the type of tape, some of them you can get them from under $100, some of them are a few $100s, so it kind of depends on the tape and the system, but it's something to consider. Now, do you want to talk about a few different backup solutions, or do you want any more background on backups themselves?
Just a little bit more background.
Sure.
Some backup systems don't use names like full, differential, and incremental. They just use numbers. So they have level 0 as a full, and then each level higher than that is basically everything from or up to any level lower.
Right. This is an easier system for me than the actual incremental differential because in my mind they're just kind of too similar. So the level with 0 and 1, that makes more sense. And all of this stuff, if you guys are having a hard time following along, Alan has nice notes in the show notes for explanations where he's talking about links and some...
the advantage with the numbers is that you can have up to like 10 levels. So you have a level 0, which is your full, and your level 1, which is everything since the last full. But then you have like a level 4, which is everything since the last level 3 or higher or lower.
Yeah.
And so on. So you can really get it tuned in there. If you want to be able to say, I want to do a backup once, say the highest level once an hour. And then, the other ones I do at the beginning of the workday, at lunch, and at dinner or something like that. And so on. You can get, really specific, or if only certain directories need the extra backups, you can say, all right, we're going to do a level 9 backup, but only on this one important subdirectory.
Yeah. I like that too. Because some things do require different levels of backup, and you can get granular like that. It's a good idea.
Like for example, at Scale Engine, we dump the database 4 times a day, where everything else only gets backed up once a day.
Sure, that's a great example.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to talk about a couple tools?
Just one last thing.
All right.
Bacula has what's called synthetic full backups.
This is interesting. This is sort of something different. Yeah.
Yeah. So what it can do is it can take the full and then like the most recent differential and possibly some of the incrementals and make a new full backup out of those. Basically by merging the full and a bunch of the newer backups, they make a new full. Now the advantage to that is that can put off the next time you have to do another full.
Right.
Or so you don't have to keep a bunch of these differentials, incrementals around anymore. You can reuse the tapes or whatever because you've made this new full backup.
In all our free time, we should do a video on Bacula because it's such an awesome tool. And it's so nice. This is just one of the many nice features Bacula has.
Yeah. And with those virtual backups, they can be especially important if you're backing up remotely. Yes. For example, our web server, our main web server, the one that does the regular websites, not the Scale Engine stuff. It has about 120 gigs of data on it. So doing the full backup takes a long time, even with gzip and everything, is because it's a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
Mostly people. Now, if we did this, yes, Bacula can do deduplication as well. If we did a full once a month, we'd be using up all this bandwidth for no reason because a lot of the files just never change.
Yeah, right.
So if we did the synthetic by taking so we do a full backup once a quarter. And then, every couple of weeks, we just merge a bunch of the differentials together into a full and make a new full, a virtual full. Then we wouldn't have to use as much bandwidth to do the backups.
It's actually one of those features that kind of seems like most enterprise backup applications would support that. Because you have all the data. Why not just why not just be able to merge it together? But I'm sure some of them do. But Bacula's free.
It's not worth the effort if you're on a LAN and you have unlimited bandwidth and, you can fire your 120 gigs across at a gigabit a second, and it doesn't take very long.
But the reason I say we should do a video is because it is not a beginner thing to set up.
Yeah, especially it's designed for doing multiple machines.
Yeah.
If you have less than 3 or 4 machines, it's definitely not worth it. But if you do have that many, it's very, very powerful.
Should we talk just briefly about rsync?
Yes.
Because that's a tool that we've mentioned a lot.
Yeah, so what I've done is I've broken down a bunch of the different tools you can use and some of the advantages to each. So rsync. The thing with rsync is it's not actually a backup tool.
No.
It was originally designed to create mirrors of websites and keep them up to date.
Yeah.
So what
like,
it does
or
is
FTP mirrors for like distro
Yeah.
releases and stuff.
Exactly. And so what it does is it creates and synchronizes files to a second location. So if that's a USB drive or an offsite server or whatever, it's going to copy your files there, and then the next time it will only copy the changes. So it's faster. The thing is, you're only keeping one copy, right?
Yeah.
So again, when we back to that example with the differentials and the incrementals, if you want the copy from Wednesday and it's Friday, the copy from Thursday will have overwritten the copy from Wednesday, and you can't go back anymore.
rsync really is though like rsync is one of those tools that helped me convert to the command line because I realized what an elegant, powerful tool you can have on the command line
Yes,
like this.
rsync, I use it all over the place.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Very awesome.
Um,
Because it can even work on the same machine. If you're just trying to sync two different directories on a machine, like, have you ever been doing like a copy from one drive to another drive and it stopped in the middle because you ran out of disk space or something and you want to resume it? And, the copy commands are like, oh, I'm going to either recopy everything or, just rsync lets you even work on, two drives on the same computer or anything.
I should jump ahead because backup PC is really one of, like, if you want a little nerd project to set up a Linux box to do backups of Windows machines or Macs or Linux, backup PC uses rsync. It sits on top of rsync, and it talks about I just saw somebody mention in the chat room, but I lost it now. Bonfire89 mentioned that rsync with hard links lets you do versioning, and that's where backup PC is really stellar. Is it combines versioning using rsync and hard links. So if I update a spreadsheet or whatever and save a version, it saves copies of it, and it uses an amazing deduplication backend. So like if you have, in the case of my wife and I, we probably have some of the same digital pictures on our hard drive, and it would only store one copy of them. But then it's intelligent enough to version if one of them changes and the other doesn't. Backup PC, it's like I said, it's a little nerdcore, but it's a free open source project that is in most distros repos, and it gives you a web interface, and it's a great tool that sits on top of rsync. So if you're familiar with rsync and you know how great it can be for backups, then you'll probably grok backup PC pretty easily. I know we weren't going to get to that till a little bit later in the round or in the feedback.
It makes sense to cover it while we're talking about rsync because it is based on rsync.
Yeah, exactly. Should we talk a little bit about snapshots? Because different file systems just support that.
Yeah, like we talked about on the Linux Action Show a couple weeks ago, the LVM system, but also FreeBSD's UFS and the ZFS all support snapshots.
And that's essentially what volume shadow copy is on Windows too. Yeah, is a snapshot.
Exactly. And so basically it's a point in time of the files on the file system. So that can be really good to use as the base of what you're taking your backup from, because backups sometimes have issues with files that are open or being written to, right? Because how do you read a file while it's being written to? And so by using a snapshot, you get a point in time where you know that file was consistent. Mm-hmm. So you can create a snapshot, back it up, and then remove the snapshot, and you don't lose any disk space, and you got this perfect clean backup.
And it's a great way to work around the open files that are locked under Windows. Because Windows has that limitation where, on Linux and Unix, that's not a consideration. The file's open, you can still make a copy of it.
At the same time, though, if you're backing up, say, a MySQL database, if you're backing up the actual data files, if with a regular backup, if you back up the first table, and when you're finished, you back up the second table, what if a row that's related between those two tables changed in the meantime? Yeah. All of a sudden, you have an inconsistent copy of that database.
The database software has to be aware that you're trying to get a backup copy, or you have to have something in place to make a dump of it first.
Right. Or if you're using a snapshot, you have a copy that's not changing. Yeah. You have a copy that exactly every file is from the exact same second.
What about doesn't the software like Bacula? I know Bacula has an agent that you can put on the machine. Does it communicate with the SQL database and do that stuff, or is
it depends. There's plugins for it, and you can with the Windows Volume Shadow Copy, it can do that on Windows for Exchange servers and SQL servers
nice.
and so on. For the Linux version, what I have it do is it can run a script before and after the backup. So what we do is we use a slave of the database. So what it does is we have our main database, and then we have a slave that we use for taking backups. So what happens is when Bacula is about to start doing the backup, it tells the slave to stop replicating. Okay. Then does the full backup, and then tells it to start replicating.
Your script tells it to do that. Basically, the script, there's a pre-backup and a post-backup script.
Yeah, and those are actually fired by the Bacula client from its config.
That's a nice little, that's a fix for that. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
If you want to know more about some of those different issues, at the bottom of this article, I've linked to an article I wrote on appfail.com talking about some of these different things, about looking at how long it's going to take you to recover and how much data you're going to lose and how to deal with databases and open files and so on.
Yeah, it's a good post.
Yeah.
Just in the show notes, yeah. Do you want to give a plug for...
The other thing about Bacula is it's cross-platform, Linux, Windows, Macs, BSD, and so on. But also it has a duplication system, so it can know that two files are the same and not back them up. It uses like SSJ 256 or whatever to hash them. And
Bacula is great because it lets you use tapes if you want, or volumes on hard drives. It's pretty flexible as what the storage backend is.
You can even have it burned to CDs if you really want to.
Yeah, that's
DVDs.
nice.
And the other thing is it has what's called base backups.
Yes, that's right.
So if, for example, you have an office with like 20 Windows 7 machines, you can say back up these specific files, for example, the Windows directory, and it will know that those are the same on all 20 machines.
Yes.
So it'll have that as a backup, and then you can have incrementals to that, for example, to cover Windows updates and .NET framework and stuff. And then separately, you have the backup for what's unique to each machine.
I really love that.
So it's kind of deduplication, but
only really intelligently. Doesn't Bacula offer like a bare metal restore method too for some situations?
I think so. They have some instructions on it, but it's not really part of the core product.
Do you have any other notes on Bacula? Because I got a tool that'll do that.
That's about it. You have one.
I'll talk about Mondo Rescue. Mondo Rescue is primarily focused at Linux and Unix boxes, but it will totally support a Windows system. And you can get a live CD of Mondo Rescue. And what it is it's a Linux environment that will create a complete recovery image for a machine that you're backing up. And you can have it stored on an FTP, or if you have the right software on your box, you can actually have it burnt directly to a CDR or a DVD, heck, even a tape, or an FTP site. And then it lets you, here's how I've used it in the past, and this will give you an idea of what it lets you do is, when I worked in IT for a school district for a while, you'd have students screwing up computers just all the time. And to save myself some time, and this is really before Ghost was really in a good spot, and now Clonezilla is what I would go with, but you could take Mondo Rescue and you could run it on a machine, just on a Linux live CD, and create a complete image backup to a set of DVDs. And then I would just tuck those DVDs in a sleeve inside the computer case, close up the case, and then if I ever got a call out to that machine and I just needed to restore it, I open up the case, pop in the disk, and I'm good to go. And I think a lot of you could probably apply something like that to your folks or a family member or significant other that you have to do tech support, and sometimes you get there and it's like, what have you done? I have to reformat and set all this up again. Well, Mondo Rescue is a perfect tool for that because it'll let you just get right back into action. It's a little trickier if you're doing Windows, so read their how-to, but it's not impossible. And it's total slam dunk for Linux boxes. I love Mondo Rescue, and of course it's open source and free, so it's a good way to go. Yeah.
And then, if you want really simple, there's little scripts like Flex Backup, which is just a Perl script that uses, the find command and tar to create an archive and let you do incremental and differential backups as just tar files.
Yeah, and if you're cool and comfortable with that, that's a really nice, simple way to handle it, and you probably are pretty comfortable with managing that kind of thing.
Yeah. And, well, it does it almost all for you. It's actually quite
I meant
useful.
like restoring from tar files and stuff, because...
Right. Yeah. And then, speaking of tar files, there's services like TarSnap.
Yeah.
Which is a BSD-based one, but
I think it's a business you should get into personally. I think that would be interesting.
Well, especially considering that TarSnap isn't available in Canada because you didn't want to have to deal with charging Canadian sales tax.
There you go. So you could just take the Canadian market by storm.
So basically, it's a little script. It's open source. The client is, so that you can audit it and be sure you trust it. But basically, it's creating a tar file of your backups, and then it encrypts it with your own AES-256 key that isn't given to the service.
So they can't read it at all.
So your files are stored in the Amazon cloud, but no one, not even the creator of TarSnap, can read those files.
Something that's a lot more commercial than TarSnap, but also does the local AES encryption before it sends it up, is CrashPlan. Now, my wife Angela has been using this for about half a year, and it runs on Mac, Windows, or Linux. And CrashPlan's sort of like a competitor to Carbonite or Mozy, where they offer a couple of unique advantages. First of all, they have some unlimited storage plans. I don't know what the prices are. I'm not really trying to give them a plug here, but I'm just telling you we've used them. But they also let you use CrashPlan to sync to a friend or another computer for free. Like you both can just run CrashPlan for free and just sync to each other if you want. And CrashPlan also lets you back up to a local drive. So if you want to have a local copy for quick restores, CrashPlan lets you do that, which is kind of nice. And, I'll just say my wife probably has about, 200 and maybe 300 gigs up on CrashPlan at this point. It took a while to get up there, but, we just set it and we just throttled it so it didn't take all of our connection and just let it go for a while. And now it's just in the background. She doesn't even notice it's running. It just synchronizes the changes of like her photos and stuff. So that's CrashPlan. I don't know, crashplan.com. It's kind of nice.
TarSnap's based on the same idea. It uses the binary diff algorithm that FreeBSD's port snap and FreeBSD update tools use. It's from the same author.
Yeah.
And so it uses an incremental binary diff system to actually do diffs on your files and store those on the service.
Very nice, sir.
So it's also incremental.
So that's a lot of stuff. And of course,
yes,
links to everything we talked about, all the different apps and services are in the show notes. I think, really, that's probably a pretty good starting point. But I want to hear if there's some other backup service out there that you love or some other system you use quite a bit, let us know. I'd be kind of curious. For a while I played with the, I think we mentioned it last week. I think I showed that video of me messing around in my garage when I was comparing FreeNAS and Windows Home Server. Yep. During that time, I tried out that Windows Home Server image backup system. And I don't know if you've seen this, but if you're a hardcore Windows user and you're kind of leaning towards going Windows Home Server, the image backup system they do is not bad. It does a full backup and then it just does nightly incremental images. So at any point you can boot off of a CD and restore from your Windows Home Server a complete image of your system. But once that first initial image backup is done, if you have a pretty fast network and you're not making gigs and gigs of changes every night, it backs up your machine in like 10 minutes every night, starting at midnight. It works pretty well. I never tried the restore, but I read a lot of success stories online. So something to look at too if you're a pretty hardcore Windows user. All right, Alan, what do you think? Are we all done with the backup stuff?
Yep.
Now, are we coming to the end of our ultimate series, you think?
Pretty much, yeah.
I have an idea. We got a question that gave me an idea for our next series. I'll tell you off there and see what you think, and maybe that'll be what we kick off next week. All right, Alan. Well, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Oh snap, Alan, it's time for the Roundup. Now, of course, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite make it into the main section of TechSNAP for whatever reason. Maybe we didn't have enough time to research them. They're just breaking. They didn't quite make the cut, but we still wanted to talk about them. So let's talk about the Roundup this week, Alan, and I'll kick it off. Our first story on the TechSNAP Roundup this week is kind of an interesting one. It's a proof of concept, and it's brought to us here by Hackaday. And they're running an article about Wi-Fi jamming using kind of a little clever trick that I'm honestly surprised people haven't figured out yet. By simulating repeated just over and over again, kind of blasting the AP with de-authentication packets. You even without having to be joined to the Wi-Fi network, you can essentially perform a denial of service on the Wi-Fi access point. So imagine, if you're sitting at a Starbucks coffee shop and you don't even bother joining, or some restaurant where they have a password-protected Wi-Fi, you could just simply just be within broadcast range and blast their AP out of existence. Yep. Kind of an interesting little hack, and probably one that we'll see people screwing with in the future. Yeah,
and especially, somewhere where people are relying on the Wi-Fi or whatever and jam it.
Now, this next story in the Roundup is I think it's breaking today, and it's about American Express and a security exploit possibly with American Express. But Alan, what's going on with this one?
So researchers claim that he's managed to break into some American Express systems, but also that their website has a debugging mode that is insecured and allows cross-site scripting injection.
And he does have some proof of concept.
That appears to have been fixed now. But because of the way it worked, it was very trivial to fix that. But the fact that he got in behind the scenes to find that was there means that, they had other problems that probably are not fixed yet.
Yeah.
Also, a bunch of back-end administrative stuff, like an Adobe server for something, I forget which service it was, is exposed, and it just sloppy admitting mostly.
He also goes on to say that he tried to warn them and that they weren't receptive to his prompts, and then he went onto Twitter to talk about it and kind of brag a little bit.
But on Twitter, he got like a level -1 tech support person.
Yeah. So sometimes Twitter isn't the best platform for those kinds of things.
Right. Because they're like, well, do you have an American Express card? Because if it is, then you can talk to this person.
But it goes back
if you
to
don't have a card, it's like, don't you know what a security exploit is? It's like, you need to send this to somebody who knows what they're talking about.
They need to have a public contact when people discover this kind of stuff. That's what it goes down to.
And we've talked about this before, right? There was the one with Sony and the one with, what was the more recent one?
Well, just the HTC one, the Android police people that broke the story had trouble getting a response from HTC.
Yeah, and
tried.
Also the Siemens one, but there was one before that. We talked about it. It was an Italian researcher who broke into something.
Oh, okay.
And he tried to contact the company, but couldn't find any way to reach them.
This is a continual problem.
Yeah.
It's a constant problem. All right, should we talk about the next story here? This is kind of an interesting one.
Telecomics has released the censorship logs from the Syrian proxy servers.
Yeah, 54 gigs worth.
Yeah. So in the country of Syria, they basically censored the internet by forcing because they own the ISP, forcing all traffic through a series of proxy servers. Somebody broke in and got a bunch of the log files and configuration on the servers. So they have a bunch of the regular expressions of what's blocked. But also, like searching for the word Israel will result in a blocked page and so on.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of interesting data in there. Now, they've anonymized it so that you can't use it to track down people in Syria, but it's a lot of interesting data to look at.
Now, this next one's really interesting because it's a mashup of technologies. It comes from an ex-NASA engineer who managed to get the whole open cloud stack, which is a Rackspace initiative, onto like a USB stick. So they're calling it USB... They're calling it cloud onto a USB stick. And
so the basic idea here is you plug this in and you set up the cloud. So you have a bunch of servers already set up. And basically, they talk about actually plugging this into the switch in your data center.
Wow.
And having the servers like network boot off of it and just the cloud builds itself.
Yeah, it says here that it uses Pent OS. And according to the company, when it's plugged into the network switch, the key lets you configure the OpenStack cloud and automatically discovers servers and begins to set itself up. It's pretty interesting.
So basically, you take the USB stick, you set it up with your config, you take it to your data center, plug it in, reboot the servers, they load off the USB stick, and boom,
join a cloud environment.
Yeah,
interesting. Now this is one of those stories where it kind of seems like maybe a few years too late, but Hitachi LG is being fined $21 million for price fixing optical drives.
Yes.
Of course,
specifically in auctions for companies like Dell and HP and all the people that buy giant piles of optical drives.
Right.
They were colluding between themselves and possibly with some of the other optical drive companies to fix the price.
Yeah. And now
never wondered why you go to Dell and you try to it's like, why can't I choose not to have an optical drive because it's a waste of $50?
Yeah. They're getting fined $21.1 million as a penalty fee. So that's interesting. All right, now this one makes me shake my head. The next one on the roundup is an air traffic control data found on eBay on some gear. So essentially, there was passwords and data on some gear that got sold on eBay. Now this is the UK air traffic service. It's not the US here, but kind of a startling precedence when for 20 euros you could get a Cisco Catalyst switch that was bought by a security consultant, and he found he's quickly discovered National Air Traffic Service's network information on there, and including supervisor credentials, internal VLAN configurations, and other network configurations that would be very handy to know if you were going to try to break the air traffic control system.
So basically, they're done with their old network gear, and like a lot of companies do, they sold it on eBay. And the issue there is that they didn't wipe the config off of it, and so now the password's hashed, but it's fairly old hash now, and depending on their setup, it might not have been hashed with MD5. But even just plain MD5 is kind of weak nowadays.
Yeah.
But the rest of their config there is just plain text. And so, especially, so you just look at their entire network configuration and see the entire topology of their internal network. By a couple of pieces of that gear, you can piece together a pretty good image of what their network used to look like.
No kidding. And for a great price, 20 euros.
Yeah, and most people, when you upgrade a network, you swap out the switch. You don't build an entirely new network with a different layout.
Right, you move the configs over, and exactly.
Right, so they have bigger, faster switches now, but the network topology is probably pretty much the same.
Okay, now, Alan, we may be asking for too much in this episode because we're telling people, root your Android device, get your backups in order, and now I got one more to throw onto the heap, and it may be too much, but it's the last story in the roundup this week, and it's an important one. a netsecurity.org ran a analysis on the number one vector for malware to get on Windows computers. And guess what? If you look in the video version, you see a little pie chart, I guess you could call it. And the huge blue section there, that's Internet Explorer. 66% of the ways of malware onto machines is through the web browser, is through Internet Explorer, and most commonly through the web browser in general, but 66% of the time it's through Internet Explorer. I just got to say, at this point, use it if you have to have Internet Explorer for a website or something. Use it when you're on that site, but otherwise, everyone, please stop using Internet Explorer. Please.
Okay. Also,
please.
make sure you have the latest version, except for, again, you end up with old apps that require an old version of Internet Explorer.
IE9 may be I don't know, it may be a fantastic example of.
But why would anyone ever go back?
Well, why go back and why go with something that's so integrated into the OS? That just seems like you're asking for it to begin with. Now,
interestingly, did you see, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a second chart there.
I did,
most vulnerable programs. We were just talking about last week about how Mozilla was considering blocking Java by default. Looks like 37% of the most vulnerable problems came from Java.
Yeah, if you take out Internet Explorer, you go, you start breaking it down to Java, and then really close after that is
Acrobat, and then Flash.
Yep.
And then actually more Internet Explorer itself.
Yep.
And then the Windows Help System.
Mm-hmm. And then a very tiny slice of the pie goes, 2% goes to QuickTime.
Yeah.
Funny enough.
But specifically, people should, if you don't use Java for anything, just disable it.
Yeah.
Go into the add-ons in Firefox and just disable it.
Now, here's the notes.
And another thing is, I have an extension for Firefox called PDF Download.
Oh, sure.
So I download the PDF files, and then I run them in something like one of the alternate programs rather than Adobe.
Sure.
But I just don't like them opening inside the browser because it's annoying. But
I did a quick survey on the site statistic. Now, these are only for the last 30 days. If I bust them out for the whole history of the site, they change quite a bit. But our number one web browser on JupiterBroadcasting.com is, by 42%, is Firefox. 29% users use Chrome. And then the third place browser on our website, coming in at 14.4%, is Internet Explorer. So I want to get that 14% off Internet Explorer. Please move off and make yourself happier and safer. And don't get your system compromised. Right, Alan?
For sure.
Yeah. And backup, and also root your Android device. Boy, I know it's a lot to ask, but sometimes we leave you with a lot of work because I think we're getting to the end of this episode.
Yes.
You'll notice
all we got.
No Bitcoin Blaster this week because Bitcoin's kind of slowing down these days. So let us know what you think. If you missed the Bitcoin Blaster and want to help bring that back, probably the best way to do that would be to submit some stories to our TechSNAP subreddit page at links.techsnap.tv.
Yep.
Because honestly, I'm having a hard time finding stories. That's why we don't have a blaster. There's maybe one story from NPR about possibly tracking down the originator of Bitcoin, but it's that's weak. You can't make a whole roundup out of that, Alan. So let us know what you think about that. But I think for right now, we might sunset the Bitcoin Blaster, and maybe we'll just have a little longer roundup in the meantime, something like that. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, just a quick reminder, you can always join us live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific or 4 p.m. Eastern over at jblive.tv. And you can download this show in just about any format you want, including what I have been learned from the stats. A lot of you enjoy this in audio format, and you can find that too over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Just look for any episode of TechSNAP. And also on Jupiter Broadcasting, you'll find right below the episode description, RSS links, so you can get this episode automatically, including links for iTunes if you want to put it on one of your iDevices. For sure. And honestly, if you're an iTunes user, we're always looking for people to give us ratings and comments in iTunes because that actually does help quite a bit.
Makes a big help other people find TechSNAP.
That's what it does. Is the iTunes system weighs that to determine if it's even worth showing your show. And since the bulk of our audience is not iTunes user, we suffer quite a bit. So if you do happen to be an iTunes user, we really do need your help because you're one of the few. Actually, that's not true. 42% of our RSS subscribers use iTunes. They just don't ever rate because they're not probably proud of it. they're a little ashamed, I guess. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for joining this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.